Welcome to Behind the Crown Podcast with your hosts, Bryan Hutson and Josh Griffin. Sit back and enjoy these great stories and memories of the Kingsmen Quartet.
Welcome to Behind the Crown Podcast with your hosts, Bryan Hutson and Josh Griffin. I want to say thank you for joining as we go over the next few minutes with our special guest as we honor the message, the men, and the music of the mighty Kingsmen Quartet. And our special guest tonight, if I've got my notes right, he's been on part of 7 top 5 Kingsmen songs, 4 number 1 songs, and on 8 Kingsmen recordings. Bryan, go ahead and introduce our special guest tonight, please, sir.
Well, the one, the only, you've heard about him, you've been warned about him. Right there he is, Randy Crawford. Randy, how you doing, man?
Howdy, boys. Doing good. Doing real good. Hope y'all are.
We are. We was getting worried about you. We figured you was out running the roads or something, and but you're here, and
I was out raising
you look
17
with a hat on. We're not used to seeing you with a hat on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I was actually out in the woods when somebody actually I was taking off some wood that my son had cut up. We had some trees come down in some storms, so I was out there messing with that. I was supposed to be on here with y'all. But then I got this text.
Yeah.
See, I didn't have my phone with me. I went to check my phone, and there it was. So, daggone, I remember I was supposed to be talking to these boys, and there it was. So now
that's right.
We got it all squared away now.
We got it squared away. We appreciate you joining with us, man.
No, this is fun. Thank y'all for thinking about me asking.
Yes, sir.
Well, you know what? We love the Kingsmen. We're this whole podcast is about honoring the Kingsmen and the guys that was there and still there, and songs, you know. So we want to share some stories tonight with you and honor you tonight with your years of the Kingsmen. So most people, of course, I met you. I'm thinking about 1988 when I first met you.
At 87
you was with a
or
group
88,
called
it
the
was about that
Cornerstones.
time. Yep.
I was with me and my brother and my cousin were singing together in Indiana with a group called the New Generation, and we were booked on the program in Columbus, Indiana, at a high school with the Cornerstones, and you were with the Cornerstones, and son, you had a big full-time mustache going on. I mean, that thing was bigger than my head. You had
a caterpillar from way
back. You was working that stash.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Son. Yes, sir.
Yes,
that was
sir.
the look.
But that's kind of where I met you, and I remember you had a tan double-breasted suit on that night.
Yes,
kind of a tan. Yeah,
I can.
Yeah,
I remember. There's a story about that suit. There's a story about that suit. That suit ended up in a trash bag, in a trash can in a dumpster in Tecumseh, Ohio. And I'm not going to tell anybody how or why it had to go there, but just trust me, boys, there was no saving that suit. It had to go. So let's just
There's no saving that suit.
There was no saving that suit. But
I understand.
You know what, Bryan? The thing with you and I, actually, me and you and Jonathan Wilburn, you two are the two boys that I met first above anybody else when I first started singing, because the Cornerstones actually sang on one of Eddie Crook's labels. And of course, you know, Jonathan and his family on Eddie Crook. And so we would do several dates a year with the Wilburns. So I got to know him and you before I knew anybody else in this industry. And we always sang the same part. So it's like we never got a chance to sing with each other. It just never happened. We would pass each other on the road or whatever. And then when you decided to leave the Kingsmen the first time, that's when Eldridge and Gregory called me to come and take your spot. And I was like, well, dadgummit, I've that's as close as we're ever going to get. And then by Ned, if the Lord didn't bless us to be able to put us together, and what I consider one of the best lives I ever sang with you and me and Harold and of course Ray Dean. So that's that. I mean, you can't.
Well, we
couldn't sing the paint off the wall back then, it wasn't going to happen. Every one of those voices on that station.
That's true. That's true. Well, let me ask you. Most people know you from your years, of course, with the Kingsmen and Brian Free. You were actually with Brian for insurance before you went to the Kingsmen. But kind of give us an idea of where, kind of how you got your start. Maybe in gospel music and how you got the love for gospel music. How did that come to you?
Oh, sure. Of course, the love for it obviously is going to come from my mom and dad, because we were always going to concerts. We were always going to see the Goodmans and the Singing Cooks. And anytime the Imperials were close, I just idolized the Imperials back then. I mean, those guys were just phenomenal. They'd always come to the Bluegrass Fair in Lexington, and then of course the Kentucky State Fair, and then the Masters 5 would always come to town. So I always get to see them, and just, my goodness, I mean, when the Masters 5 walked out there, you were looking at royalty, and so I would always get to church early with those guys, and of course at that time, as I'm getting older, getting into high school, I'm thinking, maybe this looks like a whole lot of fun. Maybe I want to maybe give this thing kind of a try.
Yeah.
So what I started doing is every time that Gold City was around, or the cathedrals actually came to my home church. They actually cut their 25th anniversary album at my home church in Lexington.
Oh.
So every time any one of those two groups was around, I would hand them a folder with a picture, a bio, and a cassette.
Yeah.
Every single time.
I
bugged the fool out of Mark and Danny and Glenn, bugged the fool out of Brian and Tim, and I would just bug them to death. Well, when I was
hold
around...
Hold on a minute.
Yes.
Hold on a minute. You might have to explain to Josh what a cassette tape is.
Oh, okay, I know what a cassette is. Yeah.
We need to explain to young Josh what a cassette is.
About yay big, about that thick. It's got 2 holes in it, you see. Has some tape that goes through
and that
the middle
tape in
of
there. Yeah.
So
I appreciate y'all thinking I'm still young.
Hey,
somebody put me on middle age, so I appreciate young.
Yeah, me and Brian used to make back in the day. We would make things called mixtapes for our girlfriends, you see, and we would play them for our girlfriends as we would have them in the car.
Okay,
but we'll again, that's a story for a whole nother day. We'll leave that one alone.
Yeah,
but when I was around 18, I get this call from a man in Houston, Texas. I was actually singing with the Cornerstones at the time, and how I got that job is I answered an ad in the paper, and they were from Hazard, Kentucky. So I guess let me back up one step.
Right.
And I had been singing with them for a little while. So when I was 18, I get a call from a man in Houston, Texas. It was a guy named Pastor Don Riley, who had a group called The Sound. Okay. And at that time, he had Pat Hoffmaster and Rick Strickland and Steve Hurst. And his and Don Riley's son Sean was singing with the group at the time, and they were looking for a lead singer. And he said,
"Wow,
Tim Riley just gave me your information and said you're a good-looking kid and a pretty decent singer, and I ought to give you a listen." So he flies me down to Houston, Texas. I go down there to audition with me and Terry. Oh gosh, I was going to say Terry Franklin, but that's not right. Terry Davis.
Terry Davis.
From the Florida Boys.
Was it Terry? Yeah. Was it Terry Davis?
Yes, from the Florida Boys. Yes.
Yeah.
So I get down there, and I notice really quickly that I'm out of my element. I'm out of my league. I'm not ready. Can I sing 2, 3, 4 songs pretty decent at a time? We did about 2 weeks worth of dates together. Rode around on the bus. We sang. Of course, Terry was telling me he didn't know if he was going to take the job. Of course, we know he ends up taking the job down there.
Yeah.
But they ended up hiring Scott Fowler instead of me.
Yeah.
Which I think they did a pretty good job. Scott's pretty fair singer, so they ended up hiring Scott. But I knew that I was not ready. I got on that plane and I flew back to Lexington and just as scared to death as I could be, because it wasn't, things weren't what I thought it was all going to be. It just I wasn't ready. I just was not mentally and spiritually ready at that time. Fast forward a little bit. I go ahead and finish school. I kept on singing with the Cornerstones for a little while. I finished college. Most folks that kind of followed me or followed the Kingsmen, followed what we do, knew I was a police officer for 5 years. So I did that. I became a police officer in my hometown of Lexington, Kentucky. Did that for 5 years. Knew at about that, as I'm into that 5th year, that I'm really not happy. I knew God had something else for me. I just didn't know what it was. So I was in a lot of prayer, really consulting with my pastor at home. Of course, Daddy, all of us that had good daddies and good spiritual daddies, we used them a lot. I thank the Lord I still have my daddy. My mother passed away a couple years ago. Still got Daddy, but a lot of counseling with him. And Daddy just said, son, if you know you're supposed to be in the ministry, you need to get there. And you need to get there as fast as you can. So me and some folks from church, a couple of people at church who were kind of feeling the same thing. We had a little group at the time at our church that we sang with. We just decided, hey, let's do this. So we named ourselves 70 times 7. We started singing, and we were one of the first new artists that Daywind ever signed. We signed to Daywind when Daywind was at the time really nothing. They had maybe 6 or 7 groups. That was about it. I mean, just almost nobody on the list. And then that's how I kind of got in front of Bryan a little more, because Bryan was with Ed and Dottie, but they were on a separate kind of offshoot label back then that was called Whitefield, which I don't even think exists anymore, boys. Unless I miss my guess on that, because Assurance at the time was trying to be a little bit more in the middle, not necessarily all Southern, but kind of more middle of the road kind of stuff. They were on Whitefield, and then Daywind, the label Daywind's what we were on, was the Southern label, the strictly Southern gospel label.
Okay.
So that's when I started doing more shows and being around Bryan some more. Well, Bryan got to a point where they were maybe doing more dates than what at the time Mike Lefebvre wanted to do. So Mike had told Bryan he was going to leave the group. So Bryan calls me and he said, would you mind coming down to Atlanta and auditioning? I want to record you and video you, and let's talk, and let's would you mind doing that? I know you got your own group, but what's the situation? I said, well, Bryan, I'm not a true baritone singer. He goes, I know it's a high baritone though. And, we'll just come down here and we'll fiddle around with it. So I go down there and we talk and I sing. And then we talked some more after he recorded. And I said, well, who else you got coming to audition? Well, he told me there was a young man named John McBroom that was coming, and John is a baritone, but John's a smooth, true baritone. John was singing with Millen Klippa and Scott Whitener and Dwayne Burke in a group called Jericho.
And Jericho was right?
Jericho was phenomenal. How that group didn't stay together and maintain, I'll never know, but Jericho was absolutely phenomenal. And I had heard John with Jericho. And I told Bryan, I said, I've already heard that boy sing. There's your baritone. There's your guy. That's who you need to hire. He goes, well, and I like you and blah, blah, blah. And you and I've known each other a long time. I said, I'm just telling you, John's your baritone. So I leave. Of course, nobody's got a cell phone at this time. Cell phones existed, but I didn't make enough money to have a cell phone. I leave on my way back from Atlanta to Lexington. Bryan had called and left a message. And here's another one, Josh. You may not have one of these. Left a message on my answering machine. It was an answering machine with a little tape in it. Little cassette tape, a baby one. So I get back to the house and I hit my messages, and there's Bryan on. He goes, Hey, Randy, it's Bryan. Call me as soon as you can, as soon as you get home. So I call him, and he answers the phone. He goes, hello? I said, Bryan, this is Randy. They're calling you back. He goes, what's your highest note? And I said, consistently every night. I don't want to sing much higher than B flat. If I've got to sing one a night, I can give you one a night, but that's all. He goes, you want to sing lead? And I said, I thought you had a lead singer. He goes, I don't anymore. Do you want to sing lead? And I said, yeah, I'll do it. So that's how I got with Bryan. A long story to get there, but
wow.
That's how I got with Bryan. And he had hired John McBroom to sing baritone. So it was Bryan and myself and John and Bob Caldwell. And that's the group that in 1 month period, that in a 1 month period won like 3 Sing a News Fan Awards. We were on the NBC Today show. We were on TNN Primetime Country, all in a whirlwind within 3 months. I hadn't been on that bus less than a month, and we were doing all that. Glenn Payne walks on the bus at convention and says, you boys are going to New York. You're going on the Today show. Bryan goes, do what? He said, yes, the producers called and they want a group from gospel music, from Southern traditional gospel, to come to the Today Show to sing. And so we were going to put together an all-star quartet, they called it. It was going to be Glenn and JD, and Anthony was going to play piano, and they were going to, just kind of piecemeal a quartet together. And Glenn said, we were sitting around, and I looked at him and I said, boys, us old men don't need to go and do that. They need to see some young guys doing what we're doing. And said, and I thought to myself, I know the young guys to send. So he literally walks right out of the meeting and comes right to the bus. We happened to all be on the bus, and says, okay, you guys are going to New York. And we went, okay, here we go. So it was a whirlwind, man. It was amazing. It was amazing. But you had been with the Kingsmen probably maybe a year prior to me getting that job with Bryan, or close to it.
Yeah, I joined the Kingsmen in '96. Yeah, yeah.
Well, so, then we joined about the same time, because that's when I joined BFA.
Yeah,
it seems like I thought you were there earlier than I got there.
Yeah, we did a lot of dates with you guys in that lineup. A lot of dates.
Oh yeah,
a lot of dates with you guys.
But just loved it. We did what was that date up in Pennsylvania? That camp that we do. What was the name of that camp? Goodness.
Was it Kempton? Was it the Blue Mountain Festival? Kempton?
I think so. They had the vinegar fries.
I believe so.
You put the malt vinegar on it and all the salt, and the tables. You can stand on stage and just look all the way through the crowd and see the table.
Typical quartet man. We don't remember much, but we remember the food. If it was good food, we remember that.
Yeah, the food.
Remember the grub.
I don't know. I don't know the name of the town, but I remember having good food. A typical quartet man.
Yes, I remember where we were, boys, but I remember that sweet potato pie they had that night was fit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well,
that's true. That's true.
I left.
But then,
man.
I was just gonna say I left the Kingsmen in 2001, and Josh was kind of curious about. Go ahead and ask that question, Josh.
Yeah. What was the audition process like with the Kingsmen back in 2001?
I was.
With you being an established singer already, I know that kind of
right.
For lack of better terms, gave you a better advantage. You know what I'm saying? But
yeah. Bryan had decided around 99-ish to go solo. So and we all honored that. We all had other things that we could kind of go to. But we are honored that, and Bryan had that season of his life, and so I came back home and kind of toyed around with, what am I going to do at this point? Am I going to sing anymore? Didn't really know what was going on. Was going through actually at that time was going through a very rough patch in my life, as a matter of fact, and I had decided that maybe I needed to go back on the police department. So what was really a plus for me is I was still within a window that all I really had to do was call the department back up, pass the polygraph, and they would hand me my badge and my cruiser back. And I could just literally just go right back out there. I wouldn't have to go through any more training or testing or any of that. I could just walk back out. Actually, I believe if I remember correctly, they were going to make me ride 4 weeks of what they call field training, just so they could cover their bases. Hey, we made sure you could still do it, that kind of thing. I had already made all of the phone calls. I'd already taken the polygraph test. I was already lined back up to go get my uniforms back. Everything was already lined up. And my phone rings, and it's Greg Fox. And Greg said, he said, Bryan has decided to move on, and we need a lead singer. And I said, okay. I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, it's kind of a known thing. If you sing with the Kingsmen, you live within spitting distance of Asheville. You got to be close. Fox always wanted you close. And I understand that. I completely understand. I get that. I told him, I said, I can't leave Lexington. He said, well, let's don't worry about that right now. Just drive down. And I said, okay. So I drove down, drove to Gregory's house. I get there, and he comes to the door and lets me in, and there's about, I don't know, I bet there's 15 youngins in that front room at Greg's house where the piano was, Brian. And they're all kind of lined up, and they're all talking, and then they'd go over there, and then one would sing with Jerry and Parker, and Andrew was playing at the time, was on piano. So Andrew would play, and Jerry and Parker and whoever the lead was going to be was going to sing. And I kind of looked at Greg and I said, "Hey man, what's going on?" He said, don't worry about them boys. Go back there in the back. That back kind of Florida room back in the back of Greg's house back there. That's where he took me. And he kept bringing me food and sweet tea. And I was back there for about 2.5 hours. 2.5, doing nothing but watching TV, eating and drinking sweet tea. And I'm just I'm going, what in the name of sense is going on here, boys? Now, I'm probably not saying anything that don't jive with Brian. Brian's going, yep, that sounds about right. Yep, sounds about right.
Oh, yeah.
So anyhow, we're losing daylight at this point, I've driven all the way to Lexington. So finally, Greg pokes his head. Hey, he said, man, the boys are ready. Come on in here. Let's sing a few. And, of course, I knew some songs, knew a few things to sing. Well, what else you know? This. Well, what else you know? Well, just take off on one, Drew, just take off on something. We'll sing it. So we sang, I don't know, we probably maybe a half hour just kicked around, laughed and cut up and sang a few and hit a few big Kingsmen and, said, end this thing like you're going to end it. We'd sit on one real big and just having fun with it. And, and the boy and Parker and of course Jerry are looking at me going, well, we don't have to decide, if they're going to let us have a vote at all, we're going to want it to be you.
Right.
They were already kind of pretty much sold on it. And of course, I'd known Ray for a long time. Ray hugged me and said, now, son, you've done a good job. You've done a fantastic job today. Just building me up, being Ray,
Oh, yeah.
So Greg didn't say anything that night. Didn't say a single word that night. I said, so, when are you going to let me know something? Because I told him the situation I was in. He said, well, I'll call you. I'll kind of let you know. It was maybe, I'm trying to think. It wasn't too long after that, a day or two after that, because the gospel music television thing in Pigeon Forge was coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And so he calls me, and this is what he said. He didn't say you got the job, didn't say anything. He just said, do you have a tux or can you rent one? And I said, I can get one. What does it need to look like? He just just a basic, just plain black tie tux, regular tux. And I said, yeah, man, I can get one. He said, get a tux, and here's all you need to know. It was get you to the other side. He said, get you the other side. Yeah, I've got that one.
Yeah.
Get you to the other side. So I get the tux, I load everything up. I head to at that time, I guess it was the Grand Theater that they used to do that at, boys.
Mm-hmm.
So I jump in my car, I buzz down there to the Grand Theater. I get there, I go up to the Kingsman bus, I get on there, and I get all, get my clothes on, I get dressed up, get everything on that I need to get together. And we go out there, and Greg's, and I'm ready to sing. I'm ready to do my thing. And Greg goes, said, thank you for coming down, buddy. I said, I really appreciate that. I said, Jason's going to sing tonight. After I got down there, so I'm like, what have I done? What in the name of I can do this song now, boys. I can do it. So anyhow, that's okay. That's fine. So I take my tux back off, load my stuff back up, head back to Lexington. I get another phone call, probably a day, maybe a couple of days later. And Greg said, when could you start? And I said, well, I didn't figure that you kind of, I didn't get to sing for that thing. I figured maybe I was out. I said, no, man. That's just, we had other things and blah, blah, blah. And I understood what he was saying. I said, when could you start? I said, I could start as soon as you needed me. He said, well, let me get some things together to send you. So probably a couple of days later, I get this huge packet of stuff, big envelope full of cassettes and CDs, no marks on them, no list anywhere. I bet he sent me 150 songs, man. It was unreal, maybe 200 songs.
Yeah.
And I called him and I said, well, you got Greg, you got a direction to travel on some of this stuff. I said, I know these are the newer ones. You want me to learn the newer projects first? He said, man, just be familiar with all of it. We could call anything.
Yeah.
I said, so are you hiring me if I got the, oh yeah, man, you got the job. You got the job. If you want the job, I said, we'll talk about the numbers and stuff. I said, well, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and do that. Make sure we're okay there. So we did, and it was, I accepted, the offer. He said, now we can't 100% lock it down until after you and I've talked to Daddy. And I said, I get that, 100% get that. Of course, this is post stroke for Eldridge. Eldridge still had, a lot going on, but he's still there at the house, still having to be taken care of. So I drove back up drove back down to Asheville. And we, of course, Eldridge lived right there beside Greg. So we go over to Eldridge's house and walk in and of course, Greg said, now, Daddy, this is Randy. You remember Randy? Randy sang with Bryan. Yeah, I remember Randy. And we talked, he asked me a few questions and we talked for a minute and said, well, Daddy said the boys really like him and he can sing. What do you think about us hiring? He said, I think that'd be a fantastic idea. You hire that boy. So I guess I'm an answer to a trivia question. I was the last man that Eldridge officially hired before he went on to glory.
Yeah.
But
That's right.
but got the job there. So I looked at Parker and I said, Parker, can you narrow this down for me? What are you going to call? Just give me 20 to start with and let me learn those. And then I'll chip away a little bit of time. So he gave me a list of things that he would call. And we started from there. And wow. that's where it went from. So it was, and again, I always thinking, I'm right behind Bryan. I'm going to be right behind Bryan. Bryan and I'd known each other forever. Of course, I just thought it was the neatest thing that when Bryan had decided to leave, that I kind of snuck in behind him and got that spot. I just thought that was the neatest thing, because it's kind of a synergy thing with he and I. It's kind of like our careers kind of followed each other in some weird ways. When we've been in the industry, when we've been out, when we've been back, and the time that we got to sing together was just, I mean, that's some of the most, those are some of the fondest memories that I have of being on the road is traveling with Harold and Bryan and myself and Ray and that bunch and us terrorizing the boy every chance we got, Cody, every chance we could get on the road.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Way too much fun.
Yes, sir.
Before we get to that lineup, Randy,
yes, sir.
Let me ask you this. In 2001, the Kingsmen name was retired. We all know that. Become the Carolina Boys.
Yes.
On the one, let's see, the two recordings you done with them. No, excuse me. Let me take that back. You done three recordings with them. I'm sorry, 3 recordings. On the Ready album or Ready CD, that one there.
Yes.
We all know your vocals is on it. Your picture took off, but one thing I want to ask you about,
where that
track number 5 on there. Yeah, that's right.
Where those little bubbles are, that yellow blob, that would have been me right there. Yeah. I was in that picture right where the yellow blob's at.
On track number 5, the song, I think you had the lead on it, If You Died Tonight. Do you remember that Rebecca Peck song? I just thought it was always a interesting song, good song, but did y'all ever stage it live or anything like that?
Tell me where would you go? Tell me where would you go if you died tonight? If you died tonight, is heaven your home? Is heaven your home? Has the blood been applied? Has the blood been applied? Can you say that you know? Can you say that you know? Everything is alright. Everything is alright. Tell me where would you go? Tell me where would you go if you died tonight? If you died tonight.
We didn't stage it a lot, but we did. We did stage that song. It was where it really worked was, of course, when Tim was back singing. He just had that, just because Tim just had that cut, that bluegrass straight cut, and he would just get up there and just play that on the flat top, and then we would sing that.
Okay.
Tim started carrying more instruments the more we started doing. Tim would carry his a Stratocaster lead guitar. He'd carry his, I believe was his. Now, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that his granddaddy's Martin or his daddy's Martin that he carried with him?
I think it was his daddy's.
Yeah. Or his daddy's,
was it?
Or
I think it was
daddy's or
his
granddaddy's. Yeah.
I believe it was.
And
I could be
I did
wrong,
an
but I
interview
think-
with him earlier this year, and his granddad's, I think.
His
Martin.
granddad?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the guitar, and a dobro. He would carry that. Of course, we still had the full band at the time. And so we could just, flatten that vibrato out, just make that, tell me where would you go? Just nail that. It was so much fun to sing. Great song. And what a simple message.
Yes.
What a straightforward, simple message. But I love that song. And what a writer Rebecca Peck is. I mean, Becky can just
great writer.
I'm going to give you a pencil and an idea. The idea is I stumped my toe. Before it's done, she'll have you crying, worshiping Jesus about stumping your toe. She's got a way of putting words together. She can do it.
She does.
She can
She does.
it.
That's a gift. It's a gift for sure.
Yep.
Yes, it is
for sure.
Good deal.
Well, the first number one song that the Carolina Boys had was "God Sits on High."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing is flat higher than a kite. You know what I'm saying?
Oh.
God sits on high. God sits on high. And he looks down low. His watchful eyes are on me everywhere I go. There's nothing he can't see from up in heaven on his throne. God sits on high. 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 And he looks down. And he looks down low.
Is it ever? Is it ever? But here was the thing. You know how Greg would be in the studio. Of course, Greg wasn't on this project, but when Greg would be in the studio, he would key something without asking anybody about a key. Just key it, and then once you go hit a note, he couldn't sing up there. He'd whistle it. You just go, oh,
Yeah.
You got to get up there. I can't sing that. Here's what we thought.
Yeah.
There's no sense in breaking with tradition. Let's go ahead and put something on there. We were still the Kingsmen as far as we were concerned. The lineup was still there. Every man was still there. So we figured, let's just go ahead and sing like we always have. There's no sense trying to change anything. This is who we are. Man, for about maybe 6 months, we would get to a place and the marquee would say, formerly the Kingsmen. We didn't have a name. We hadn't named ourselves yet.
Yeah.
It would just say, formerly the Kingsmen. So when Harper was booking us, he would say, it used to be the Kingsmen. We can't say Kingsmen anymore, but that's who's coming. So they would say, formerly the Kingsmen.
Right.
That was an interesting time.
I can imagine. I know when I was in West Virginia, and they still had a gospel show on Sunday mornings, local DJ, and I remember going to church one morning and they played here's the Carolina Boys #1 song, God Sits on High, and it started, and y'all changed keys like 13 times or something on it. I mean, it just kept going up and up and up. And
it's a good 13. It's a good 13 times.
I said, Lord, thank you that I'm not on that recording. I'd be pulling up an extra pair of socks just to get up to that high note. I mean, it just kept going up and up and up.
One of the first things that I had to sing as soon as I got there, don't you tell me about singing high. I had to get there and sing Joy's Gonna Come in the Morning. So don't talk to me about singing high. Good grief in heaven. Holy moly. And then sing out on Sunday morning.
That was a good.
Yeah.
That was a good record, though. It was a good record. It was.
Oh, my God.
It was a good record.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. That I Will project was a fantastic project.
It was, man. It was killer. But now you may not have watched last week's podcast, but we had young Jerry Martin on there on the podcast.
Oh,
of course.
Gosh.
I was unable to be on the podcast due to technical difficulties. But I'm sure you can attest, and we can tell our listeners, and we can tell Josh. Jerry had mentioned about Brandon and himself were gaming buddies in the back lounge of the bus.
Oh yes.
But
yes.
Jerry Martin failed to mention the 007 game that was out at the time, and how he would absolutely destroy every one of us on that game. Because what that was, it was a game where, you know, you pick a character and you're running all through the game and you're trying to find the other characters to shoot them, you know. And Jerry always picked the shortest guy. He was a little bitty dwarf type character, you know. He was a henchman, you know. And Jerry always picked that guy. And man, he would come out of nowhere, and I mean, he would shoot me, and I wouldn't even get a round off to anybody. So Jerry Martin was mean. He was little and mean on that game.
I about to say, did y'all worry about that? Was he thinking things?
Yeah, on those games, brother. I promise you,
he was.
I
Man,
promise you. I will tell you another one who could do you that way was and I don't know if you ever ended up playing some games with him back in the backyard, was the young Dr. Nick Succi. So Nick would wear your
No, I did not.
Oh my gosh, Nick would sneak up behind you and smoke you. Made me so mad sometimes I quit playing with him. I just quit.
Oh, I know.
Y'all, I'm old and I'm no good at this stuff. Give me a little
Jerry
to help here.
Jerry would do that.
You know, Jerry and I
would do that to me all the time. And one time I threw the controller down one time. I said, I'm done. I'm out of here. I said, I'm not. He won't even give me a chance. You know what I'm saying? So.
I did the same thing.
You know,
that Jerry and I, when we would be playing cards, Jerry and I would always buddy up and play spades together. So Jerry and I had some good spades runs. We'd play against, who would Andrew play with sometimes? Maybe Floyd. I forget who Andrew would play with sometimes. Yeah. I don't think Brandon played much cards. He's probably playing with Floyd, but we would. We and you probably did too. There were some cutthroat spades games that went on in the back lines of that bus.
Oh yeah, son. Oh yeah. Well, you mentioned the time that you and I traveled together, and
sure,
we had a number one song together. He's Everything I Need. You know, that's all I need.
Yes,
that was a number one song we were on, and that was pretty cool. That, you know, we got to share that in there, and then of course. That was on the last project I did during the second round that we sang together. But you had so when you left the Kingsmen the first time, what were you doing in that meantime? I know you also returned back to Bryan for a while, but
I did. I left the Kingsmen. I left the Kingsmen at that time, and I was actually living in Nashville at the time.
Okay.
And oddly enough, kind of piddling around in the Nashville kind of background music singer kind of scene a little bit. I had some friends and some people who would have you come over to sing for a little project for this guy or sing for nobody that anybody would know. The only thing I got to sing on that was kind of pretty cool, I thought at the time was and this is when I was still actually. This would have been Carolina Boys, I guess, at the time, because I had already moved to Nashville at the time. Was there was some kind of big special song that somebody had put out post 9/11. It was after the Twin Towers had fallen, so we did kind of a thing for that. But I kind of stayed with that. Of course, I was trying to kind of maybe make a name, if you will. Started working, of course, you got to pay the bills. So I started for corporate division of Office Max. I was like a business to business salesperson for Office Max. And my big account was the Southern Baptist Convention and Lifeway Christian Bookstore. So, they're writing in downtown Nashville. Well, they used to write in downtown Nashville. I think all that's up for sale now. But anyhow, I worked with that for a number of years. And then Office Max got absorbed at that time, and then a dear friend of mine that I had known for many, many years from Kentucky, from the Lexington area, and a dear friend of yours, somebody that you and I both looked up to, as a mentor, among other things. George Amon Webster calls me and said,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He said, Randy, what are you doing? I said, what are you doing? And I said, well, Amon, I'm sitting here on the couch, kind of laughing. He said, no, you big dummy.
Yeah.
I said, what are you doing right now? What are you doing? You singing? What are you doing? So I'm not doing a thing. He said, well, me and Terry Tony need some help with the Tony brothers. Would you mind coming singing lead for us? I said, well, how many dates you doing? He told me not many. And I said, yeah, sure. So I sang and cut a couple of projects with the Tony brothers. We cut a live project and then another kind of little studio project there at Garland Craft Studio. Some people remember Garland from the Oak Ridge Boys. You know, he's a Grammy award-winning Garland Craft with the Oak Ridge Boys.
Yeah.
So sang with them for a little while, and while I was singing with them, I got two phone calls. I've probably been there maybe a year, maybe a little over a year. I get two phone calls. One's from Danny Riley and one's from Brian Free. And Danny told me, he said, again, you always get this question. Hey man, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, doing anything. What you got in mind? He goes, I'm going to need a lead singer. I said, I thought you had a lead singer. He said, well, I do, but there's going to be a change. You know, didn't go into any kind of details. Just said there's going to be a change. And he said, you mind meeting me and Michael Sykes and some other guys over at this studio? He gave me a location there in Nashville, so I met him over there, and we sang a few songs and sang with a couple of guys and Dusty Barrett. Some of you guys know Dusty. Dusty was there auditioning for tenor as well, and so we laid some vocals down, did a few things, and I went on. I said, well, when are you thinking? I asked Danny. He goes, I said, when are you thinking about making the move? He said, probably within the next month or so. I said, I'll let you know. I said, well, just, okay. And I had not called Brian back at this point, so I called Brian. Brian said, hey man, I need a singer. And I said, what's happening to Bill? And he said, oh, nothing's happening to Bill. I said, Derek's leaving. And I said, you and I have already had this conversation. I'm not a true baritone singer. He said, it's high. You know it's high. I said, yeah. I said, I just don't have that big, broad tone down there that like a George Amon Webster or somebody like that would have. Just Squire Parsons. I just don't have that. And he goes, you'll blend. You and I blend. I said, all right. He said, and if it's in your, when you have a solo, sing it in your range. We'll bring your songs back, whatever you want to do. I said, all right, where are you going to be? So he told me they were going to be close by. And so I went up and sang just a couple of songs. And Brian said, man, I love it. I knew this was going to work. I said, you offering me the job? Because, man, I need to offer you the job. I said, I got one more kid I want to audition because I promised him I would. So let me audition him. I said, that's fine. But I told him, I said, Danny is thinking about hiring me to sing lead for Gold City. And he said, just let me know, if you get that phone call. So time goes on. Brian calls me and goes, man, have you heard from Danny? And I said, no, I hadn't heard from him yet. He said it could be a month. He said, well, just call him, see what he's thinking. So I called Danny. I said, Danny, do you know anything yet? He goes, yeah, I'm going to be making a move. I just don't know when. And I said, okay, that's fine. I said, but Brian has called me and he's wanting me to come back. And he said, if that's what you want to do. And I said, that's not what I said. That's what I wanted to do. I just want to know what your offer would be. What kind of, it's all the particulars, all the things you have to talk about when you're talking about a job: money, days off, time, all those things you have to think about when you're dealing with family and youngins and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Right.
And he said, call me back in a couple of days. So I called Brian. I said, Danny wants me to wait a couple of days to call him back. He said, well, man, I've got to move. I got to move on something quick, because they were actually getting ready to record. Brian was as well.
Okay.
So I called Danny back, and he said, man, I just don't know. I just don't know yet. I said, well, Danny, Brian is offering me a job right now. And I said, I kind of need something. And all Danny said was, well, man, you got to do what you got to do. And I said, okay, bud, I think I'll take that job with Brian.
Okay.
So I said, but I love you. He goes, man, hard feelings. I know you. I know. And so I went back with Brian. So that's how I went back with Brian. Yeah. Then that was coming to a close for me at the exact time that Ray needed somebody back with the Kingsmen. So I literally walked off the Assurance bus and loaded my stuff right onto the bus when Phil walked off. And here's the funny thing about that. And I know Brian knows this, but Josh, you may not have kind of really got the timing. When I left the Kingsmen the first time, they still had, of course, Tim was still there. Bub was still singing, and Jason, they pulled young Jason Floyd's self up to kind of, they shared the singing duties, going back and forth between lead and baritone, and both of them were kind of swapping back and forth. Well, they come to realize real quickly that they needed a dedicated lead singer, somebody with some consistent highs up there to sing it all night long, because it was killing both of them to keep swapping back and forth.
Yeah.
And Tim was kind of going through some reflux issues at the time as well. So his voice was giving him some issues. So what do? They go and hire Mr. Phil Hughes. So technically, Phil took my place. And then when he left, I came back and took his place. So kind of a neat,
kind of swap back and forth,
kind of a circle that worked.
Yeah.
But Phil, it was so funny. I was Bill. It was actually my shift to drive, so I'm driving Brian's, the coach that I was with insurance. Bill comes up the front lounge and he goes, man, I know you're leaving here. He said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I really don't know at this point. I said, but I'm kind of open. I've kind of got married. He goes, I just got off the phone with Phil Hughes. I said, okay. He goes, he turned his notice in to Ray today. I said, today? He said, oh, he said, yeah. So he literally walked into the office, the Kingsman office, and told Ray he was done today.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's giving him any notice or anything? He said, no, he's gone before the West Coast tour. He's done. I said, okay, then. Yeah. So I called Cuz up. Because all this. Brian knows his whole story, the intimate details, this whole story. So I called, I don't know if I called you first or if I called Ray first. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember who I called first. But anyhow,
I don't remember.
I don't know if I called you first, if I called Ray first, but I ended up talking to Ray, and I said, you need a singer because I'm available. And he said, well, yeah, son, we wasn't real sure what was going to happen. Didn't really have a whole lot of idea on kind of what we was going to be doing. They said, but if you want it, come on. I said, well, talk to the boys, see what they think. Is no, you just come on. So I literally unloaded my stuff off the insurance bus in my car and drove that week to Asheville and loaded my stuff on the bus with the Kingsmen. It was that fast. So, and we got to travel some roads together and make some great music together, buddy. We did. We absolutely did.
A few weeks ago when Josh was interviewing me, Josh asked me a question. I'm going to ask you the same question. Josh, you asked me how it was transitioning from a lead singer to a baritone. You were asking me that question, Josh? So, Crawford, for you,
thank you.
You were a lead singer, and now when you came back with the Kingsmen the second time, you were baritone more, which me and you, we flipped around a little bit. But then when I left, Bob, they hired Bob Sellers. Then you were the permanent baritone. So how was it?
Yes.
How was it mentally and also vocally going from lead singer to baritone singer? Because for me, I had to learn, and my answer was, and whatever you decide to answer, but my answer was I had to realize I didn't have to sing as loud. I didn't have to put, I was more concerned about blending than I was anything. Instead of just trying, because a lot of times the sound of the quartet is really built around the lead singer many times. So I had to back off and not sing as loud and really, really worry about blending more than I ever had to before, because they have to blend with me typically, if you're the lead singer. So for you,
indeed,
give us an idea of what it was for you when you went from lead to baritone.
My thing was I had to realize that I couldn't. I really tried to be that big, huge traditional Eldridge Fox, Squire Parsons, that broad. I wanted that to be that big, broad tone that always gave a rock foundation for the Kingsmen. You know, Ray had always been a great bass singer, but Ray was a cut singer, not a big whoa kind of singer. Ray was just a bury it and just a cut your head off kind of singer. And the Kingsmen always had these big, broader toned baritone singers, of course, until Parker. And then Parker had a lot of cut. Parker still had good tones, round tones, but he had a lot of cut in there too. So I kind of tried to find that place. I knew it was all about blend, and I realized that my instincts, and see, that was the thing. I had to almost in my brain forget what I used to do, because your instincts as a lead singer is to do some different things, especially on some endings or some pickups to a phrase or something to kind of to push something along. You know, when you feel like the energy is there and it needs a little more, you know, the lead or the tenor can do it just a little something, a little curl or a little something to really just pull a little bit more out of it. My instincts was always to go and try to do that kind of stuff, but that wasn't my job any longer. So I had to almost in my brain, I had to say, okay, I got to forget that. I got to get out of my head. And then I remember, okay, you're not Foxy. You're not Squire. You're not even Parker. You're Randy Crawford. So find that part of it's not like I didn't have the notes. The notes were there. So it's ease up and be myself in those moments. And then of course I've got one of the best lead singers that I've ever been around singing above me. So I've got Bryan singing above me. Matching his tone to me was easy. It was easy for me to match Bryan's tone because I'd listened to him forever. You know, we've been friends forever, and I'd always listen to their singing and everything Bryan had done. So me being able to match your tone wasn't an issue at all. But of course we had Harold singing on the top, who is not your typical tenor singer. He is a knock your head off tenor singer, you know, just knock a wall down. So, and then you've got that kind of voice. So when we would hit an ending, if I hit it too easy, I got buried. So I went back and started listening and going, I'm getting buried here. I need to come out a little stronger. So I think our blend got better in the second year.
Grace is come and race beside me. I don't have to be convinced that when you give it in to failure, you'll try again. Grace says you cannot surprise me. No matter what you do.
The second year that I was there, because it took me a little while to kind of transition, because it was a real mental game. I had to really think that's not your job anymore. Your job is not to push the energy. Your job is not to make this happen or make that happen. You got great guys that can do that. Do your job. So it was a learning game. It really was.
Well,
if that makes sense.
And so talking about that, it makes total sense. And talking about when I rejoined the Kingsmen in 2007, I became the MC. And then when I left in 2000, at the end of 2011, you became the MC. So my question, you know, we're following in the footsteps of Jim Hamill, Parker Jonathan at the time, and you know, and when Ray asked me when I came back, he said, "Can you MC like Jim Hamill?" I said, "Nobody can." So your approach to MCing and what that means is for the people listening and watching in the podcast tonight, MCing means you call the program, meaning you call the songs, you're talking between songs, you're setting songs up, and really you're thinking, not only are you thinking, but you're singing and you're thinking what the next song is going to be, and you're thinking ahead 3 or 4 more songs from where you're at right now. You're thinking ahead. And so I was not a Jim Hamill MC, and so I really wasn't a Parker Jonathan MC either. So I tried to emulate those guys. I pulled pieces of their MC work. So was there somebody you kind of followed with your MC, and what was your thought process, and what was your direction when you MC'd for the Kingsmen? Because you were there from, you MC'd from 2012 to 2018. You called the program every single night. So kind of give the listeners a little bit of what your mindset was and your direction.
The first year of my MC work was a complete train wreck. I mean,
hey, I'm right there with you, brother. I'm right there with you.
Train wreck. It was horrible. And and Ray would try to build me up, or the guy said, "No, it ain't that bad. You're just looking." Here's where there's two things I had to realize. I knew I couldn't be Hamill. And I appreciated that about you, because when you were MCing, you didn't try to be Hamill. No. You and I both worked enough dates where Hamill was on stage MCing, and enough dates with Parker on stage MCing, to where we could have tried to pull both of those into our style. But
yes,
I appreciated that about you, because you didn't try to do that. You were you. And so when I took over the MC duties, I knew that there's no way of being those guys, just be me, be who I am, but just maybe a little more animated. The thing that I was able to pull from is I was really lucky, because while I was in college, I did a couple of musicals in college. So I had just a little bit of, go over the top with what you're doing and your facial expressions and things, so it translates off the stage. Whether there's 10 people out there that are 15 feet from you, or whether you're at Freedom Hall and there's 21,000 out there, and the guy on the very, very back at the top section has got to see what you're doing and believe what you're doing and what you're saying. So I had to bring some more of that out. You just have to think like that. And your face and your eyes really sell what you're saying. But here was the biggest thing for me, is I was in the beginning, and I had to learn this, and I had to go back to Steve Hurst and talk to him and kind of get to I was talking too hard.
Yes,
I was
me too.
Like I was singing. When I would be lead, if it was my solo or something, I thought I had to put that much energy and that much force and that much pressure into the microphone when I was emceeing, and I was basically smacking my chords together 1,000,000 times a night harder than I ever had to do that. So I had to pull it back just a little bit. I had to lighten up just a little, because I was killing myself, just absolutely killing myself. I would get home, we'd start the date, say Sunday morning or Sunday night, whenever we were singing, and I would feel like I had been singing for 3 weeks with a recording in the middle, and that's just that it shouldn't be that way. So once I finally got through that, and just was me, the big happy idiot that I've always been, and just let that translate to people. Because here's the thing: if they don't like you and they don't relate to you, it doesn't matter what you say. You can be offering them gold, which we are, the gospel of Christ. That is gold. I mean, eternal life, salvation in Him.
That's right.
You're offering the best thing that you have. But if you're not, it's almost like a sales thing. If they don't trust you, if they don't believe you, if they're not engaged with you, it doesn't matter what you say. So I just had to forget about trying to be anything but who I was, and be me, and introduce these guys and build them up. The one thing I did do, I took a page out of Jim's book, and this was Jim's style. I built anybody that came into the group, anybody new that came into the group, anybody we brought up on stage to audition or anything like that, I built them up like they were the greatest thing since sliced white bread. This is the best that you'll ever hear this boy singing right here. You hear him, he's from, Halifax, Nova Scotia. You can't, don't you dare turn away until you've heard this young man say, just really just built him up, and just brought the big height, brought the big picture to him. And and everyone just accepted who we had, And of course we had some
Yeah.
awesome singers walk in, after
Oh yeah.
Bryan and Harold had left. Those were entirely too big of shoes to fill. But when you bring a guy in
Yeah.
like Bob Sellers and Chris Jenkins, I mean, good grief in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, talent,
Yeah.
just talent beyond talent, and that's who I got to sing with the rest of my time. So fantastic guys,
That's right.
just fantastic singers. And then great guys to travel with, too. Great guys to travel with
Oh
as well.
yeah. And I'll mention right quick, like before we wrap it up for tonight, but I'll say this in my honest opinion, my humble opinion too. You sang with probably the three of the greatest tenors in this genre of music, really.
Yes.
Brian Free, Jerry Martin, and Chris Jenkins. I'll tell anybody that. That's just my opinion,
Yeah, you won't get an argument out of me, brother. You won't get an argument out of me. One,
Yeah.
I absolutely did. All three of those men right there are just different. They're just made different. They're just different guys, different singers. Just I hate to say it this way, but we would always just call them freaks. Those guys are freaks. That's the only thing you can say. Freak of nature. They're just absolute freaks.
In a good way.
Jerry would get up on a Sunday morning and just blow your head off. Just clear as a bell, just ring it. Brian Free, I've never heard Brian miss a note ever in my life. Maybe when he was sick a little, had a head cold, maybe when he was having his, his problems with his gut and stuff, he was not feeling 100%, but golly Moses. And then, Jenkins, it's just the sky is the limit for him. He's already established himself as one of the best there is right now. So the sky is the limit for him. It's only gonna be him quitting is the only way people are gonna forget about him. And I don't think he's quitting. I think he's locked in. So he's doing a great job.
Yep. That's right. Well, everyone, we appreciate you joining in on this episode with Randy Crawford. I've enjoyed it so much getting to talk to you as a big Kingsman fan myself. And I remember seeing you all those years with Bryan and Harold and Ray Dean, and of course Bob and Chris and Ray Dean as well. And you always been so nice to me at the concerts and just treated me just great, and just been a great fan of yours. You were just one of the best to us
coming to see us. We always had a smile from you. Usually there was some food maybe along the way. I mean, there was something.
Always some food involved. Always food involved.
Oh, that's right. Always some food. Hey, Brian, I've got one other thing I got to ask you. Did you ever get left? Because I got left.
Uh-oh. Well, go ahead and tell us a good roast story.
Missouri.
Yeah.
And you know who figured it out? Because I didn't have my phone on me. My phone was on the bus.
Who?
You know who figured it out and come back to get me? Cliff.
Remember our driver Cliff? Brother Cliff.
Brother, I'll tell you what. I did a head count and said, well, where's Randy? There ain't nobody knew where he was. Left me at that restaurant. We had gone to see Jesse James' grave in Kearney, Missouri, and there's a restaurant near there. We had gone and eat. I know you probably eat there. We had gone to eat, and I had gone to the bathroom, and they pulled out and left my hind end. Had to come back and get it. It was Cliff that figured it out.
I got left. Me and Andrew got left at a Shoney's one day. We were in Withville, Virginia. I don't know how they did. It was the middle of the day, and got left. Right, they left both me and Andrew, and then I think one other time. But what I started doing early in the mornings, because if we pulled into Walmart or someplace, and I wanted to go into Walmart, I took a piece of paper and I wrote Brian's inside and put it on the driver's seat.
Same thing.
So if somebody sat down, they're going to see. Because here's the thing, Josh, you may not realize this. In the early morning hours, everybody's curtains pulled. Somebody gets up. Okay, we got to go. I'm hoping nobody's inside. And they just crank the bus, and they don't think about going and counting and pulling curtains back and seeing who's in bed. So it happens, man. And then especially the days before cell phones, there's no way. I know. Well, and then we left Andrew one other time. Andrew Ishii, we left him, and he got a hold of the state police, and the state police come, sirens rolling behind us and pulling us over. you left somebody back there. We had no idea. We had no idea we left him. So
That's the greatest thing ever.
Oh man.
Yep, brother Cliff.
Look,
He
give
come back.
us a good story, Crawford.
Yeah.
Well,
give us another good road story right quick.
That was my story. That's one.
Well, I tell you what. Give us one with Ray Dean. Give us one with Ray Dean if you can.
That's the one. Okay,
give us a good Ray Dean story.
I'll give you a good Ray Dean story. Of course, I got a million of those, but this is one of the best ones. There, we were sitting, and I don't remember where it was. Seems like I want to say it was in Tennessee, but the location really is irrelevant. We were sitting in a Japanese restaurant, and we had sat down to eat, and of course, everyone's ordering. And then Ray's looking over the menu, and Brandon's trying to give him some kind of hints on what to get and so forth. He looks at the little girl and said, and these exact words, "Darling, do you all have some ranch dressing?" And she just kind of looked at him and said, and saltines, just saltine crackers, and she had gives us some ranch dressing. And she just kind of looked at him sideways, and she kind of shook her head like she understood. And so she walks off.
Okay.
2 minutes later, she comes back with just a clean plate and sets it in front of him and walks back off. That was it. That's what she got. Clean plate out of ranch dressing and saltine crackers.
And saltines.
Yeah. The other one, and I'll never forget this if I live to be 1,000. We're in Applebee's, and seems like I want to say who all was there. I mean, this was. There was a bunch there. It seems like I want to say Bill Bailey and a bunch of people. Just great big table. Somebody got us a great big table. We'd sung down there. Bunch of us at the table. Well, me, Brandon, and Ray are all the way at the end of one of the big tables they had set up there. Ray's looking at the menu, and he looks over at Brandon. He says, "BR, what's a sirloin?" And Brandon goes, "Dad, that's a steak." "Oh, yes, steak, yeah." So the lady comes by, and he says, "Now, here's what I want. I want this sirloin," said, "but can you butterfly it and cook it well done?" Okay, now you and I both know that a sirloin at Applebee's is only about maybe a 1/2 inch thick, maybe.
Yep.
Maybe. We also know sirloin has almost no fat in it. So if you butterfly it and you cook it well done, it's going to be like a brick when you bring it to the table.
Yeah.
So she just shook her head. Yeah. So this thing comes to the table, and it's butterflied. And I'm looking at it, and I can't help but start giggling. I can't help it. Ray can't get his fork in it. Ray goes to put his fork. He goes, "Oh, I can't eat this thing. It's like shoe leather. Get this." Brandon goes, "Daddy, you told her to butterfly a sirloin steak and cook it well done." Brandon's trying to talk some sense into him. He said, "Give that to me." So Brandon tries to eat the thing, and they order Ray something else. Oh, it was always an adventure. The adventure with Ray was going to eat lunch or supper. That was the adventure with Ray. It was always an adventure, boys. Let me tell you.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you.
Never a dull moment. Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. But let me tell you that the greatest stories that Ray could tell, and that I used to love to get from him was back during his time in the military when he was over. Ray actually guarded war prisoners, World War II prisoners. He guarded one of the worst war criminals from the Nazi era, a guy named Albert Speer, who was just a horrible human being. But Ray was his guard for I don't know how long, but Ray actually had a kind of a pseudo type relationship with this man, and he was writing his memoir during the whole time that Ray was there with him, and just the stories that Ray could tell about that kind of stuff. Ray's one of a kind. Ray's absolutely one of a kind. There are a lot of boys that are standing on his shoulders that have him to thank for, especially a lot of bass singers for a lot of trails that man blazed. Absolutely, a lot of go to him. Absolutely.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah, he inspired a lot of people, and that's one thing I'll always appreciate from my years with Ray and Brandon, where they were leading the Kingsmen and still are. They always took care of my family. Even my first tenure when Greg and Elders were there, and they always took care of my family and took care of me. And Brandon and Ray did the same thing. We never missed a paycheck, and I know there's some lean weeks and there was bus breakdowns and all those type of things that quartets go through. But they always took care of my family, and I'll be forever in debt for that. You
and I, Bryan, both know, and if I'm holding this over too long, boys, tell me. But you and I both know that in the business, there are times when guys don't get paid or things fall through and all kinds of stuff happen. Yep. Never happened with BFA, and it definitely never happened with the Kingsmen. They always took care of me, whether it was Greg was holding the reins or whether Ray was holding the reins, whoever was doing it. As a matter of fact, the first time that I was with the Kingsmen, I was actually in a situation where there was a very special person to me who was that I got word that was literally hours from passing away. And I needed to get home. That wasn't a family member. It was a dear person to our family. I needed to get home. And I went to Ray and I said, Ray, what to do? I mean, I'm in tears. I said, but we're in Mississippi. Yeah. And I said, I've got to get to Lexington, but I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, you sit right here. He came back maybe about a half hour later. And he said, there's a man that's getting ready to come pick you up here at the bus. He's going to take you to the airport. He's going to put you on an airplane and you're going to fly from Oxford. He said, you're going to fly from Oxford into Lexington. There's a ticket that's waiting on you when you get there. I said, how am I doing? How do I take care of it? He said, you don't have to worry about any of it. You just go get on that plane and you get home and let us know when you get there. Yeah. He took care of everything. Man made a phone call. Still to this day, don't know who he called. Don't know how the ticket got paid for. But I had a plane ticket from Oxford, Mississippi, all the way back to Lexington, Kentucky. And I got home in time to be there to say my goodbyes. But I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that because I didn't even ask for that. I just said, Ray, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, you sit right here. Yeah. And about a half hour, he'd come back and it was taken care of. And sure enough,
that's Ray Reese for you. I mean, that's Ray Reese.
I'll never forget that. And there's no way what that meant. That old man has absolutely, and I've told him more than once what that meant to me, but he'll never really understand what that meant to me that day. Yeah. Yep. So he definitely took care of us. It was always good to always good to Caroline, Carolyn, and Caroline used to cut up school on the boats, on the cruises and stuff. And they were super people to us. They really were.
Yeah, they were. Yep. Absolutely.
Well, Randy, if you don't mind, I know we're about out of a little over an hour, and I don't want to cut us off, but we definitely gonna have to get you back on here soon.
Anytime, Josh. Y'all holler. Maybe this time I'll try to be on time.
Hey, that's fine. I promise you that's fine. That's fine. Bryan, if you want to, go ahead and close us on out, please, sir, if you will.
Well, thank you for joining us this week on the Behind the Crown podcast. Sorry about that. And we've had a wonderful time with you, Randy. We appreciate you jumping on here with us. Tell Caroline and the family we said hey. And
I'll do it.
Of course, and people can come. People can come and see you now with Real Truth Revival. You've been with them for a while now.
Yeah.
And you're doing dates with there, and you're back in the quartet again, doing a great job, of course. But anyway, man, seriously, Crawford, you take care of yourself, man. We appreciate you joining us this week, and we'll stay in touch. And we appreciate your years with the Kingsmen. Appreciate you talking with us, and we'll get you back on here again. We'll share some more stories.
Yeah. Love you, Randy. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it, man. We'll see you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Behind the Crown podcast with your hosts, Bryan Hutson and Josh Griffin. If you would, please like, rate, and share this episode. Join us again for another episode of the Behind the Crown podcast.